nonprofit environmental group, REVERB. We started this thing during the first year of the COVID shutdown. We called it Quarantine Kitchen. We had a lot of fun interviewing all sorts of folks in their homes as they were cooking their favorite dishes, from musicians and celebrities and other interesting folks like chefs. And we were having so much fun doing it. Even though music's back out on the road, we thought we'd keep this rolling for a little bit more. And it's been a lot of fun. We are going out. We just finished a bunch of great tours at the end of last year and are about to launch another round of awesomeness, starting with Billie Eilish next month and Tame Impala and many, many more coming. So stay tuned on all of that. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about sustainable recipes and cook and interview our first guest that I just met, which is amazing. Usually we at least have a day to talk before, but we just met right before we went live here. And what a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this. This next guest, I don't know why I try and make it a surprise. It's already been advertised. So it's Maggie Rose. No surprise. She comes from Nashville. She's a Nashville-based artist whose music has been described as rock and soul with influences from rock, soul, folk, funk, and R&B. Her latest album, Have a Seat, came out last year, and Rolling Stone and American Songwriter both called it one of the best albums of 2021. She also hosts a podcast called Salute the Songbird, where she interviews other female musicians about their lives in and out of music and much, much more. Tonight, she's going to be cooking a sustainable recipe for us, Impossible Chili. So please welcome Maggie Rose.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, Adam. It's lovely to meet you, first of all.
Nice to meet you too.
What a better way to meet than through hanging out in each other's kitchens. That's where all the parties end up anyway. So we're getting it started in the kitchen.
That's it.
And I just love what you're doing. I think, especially as a touring artist, I get the occasional existential crisis about what the impact of touring has as far as our carbon footprint. And I do think that every little bit counts. I mean, I'm an optimist in the sense that we as individuals can make a difference in our impact globally. So
awesome. That's great. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for cooking. And I know it's a commitment to do this, so I really appreciate you going for it and doing this. Do you cook much? Like, is this a regular evening activity for you, or is this rare? How would you rate yourself as a chef?
I love cooking because I think I've made this association with cooking as I'm in a place where I feel comfortable. Usually I'm at home, because out on the road, you're kind of beholden to whatever's available for you. So I think it just means that I'm in a relaxation mode. You're able to feel a little bit more nourished. You know exactly what's going in your body, where even if you think you're being virtuous on the road, there's still an element of mystery to what it is that you're actually eating. And it's a very creatively inspiring place. I think that a lot of times I need a distraction when I'm doing anything else, like running errands or exercising. But with cooking, I can just have some music going and feel like I can sort of detach from everything going on. And it's my love language. I feel like the Italian mother in me loves to feed people that I care about.
That's awesome. You mentioned touring. You just did a long tour.
We did a really long tour, and as you know, these have been very exceptional times to try and put a tour together. But people have been amazing. The people who are showing up are going through the protocols that we're asking them to do. They're getting vaccinated, and they're protecting each other. They're protecting us, and we are trying to do that back, but within reason. Even at the end of the year, we had some shows that I was really looking forward to in St. Louis and North Carolina, and they just weren't feasible. But I feel like give yourself and everybody some grace right now after what we've been through. But it was so awesome to be able to give this album away, because I had it pretty much finished before the pandemic even began. And when everything was canceled overnight, the idea of putting it out without touring was just almost too hard to imagine. So we waited some time, and those songs actually evolved and deepened in their meaning, given the context of what we were going through, because it's about communication and empathy and compassion, a lot of the songs. And those themes just seem to carry throughout. So I'm very proud of us for pulling together and doing it. But yeah, there were some curveballs thrown at us along the way, and we just kind of try to be thankful for what we got to do.
It's amazing. I mean, it's honestly like an accomplishment to complete a tour during this time. It's just, we haven't seen a lot of them do that.
Yeah, I think we all just high-fived each other and we're like, we did it. You know, we set a goal, and not everything ended up being exactly what we expected it to be, or I guess we expected, but we were hoping for it to be. But I think I'm just totally motivated to write for this next project, knowing how much I love it. So definitely reaffirm my gratitude for what we get to do, but also just made me realize how, you know, the opportunity that you have at this moment really is the only one you're guaranteed. I know that sounds kind of trite, but it made us play better, I think, just knowing that maybe tomorrow the show wasn't going to happen.
Totally. And just that you're lucky that it's happened. Like, wow, we got to do this. And I
Right.
think that's that, you know, I was a musician on tour too. Like, sometimes you forget how lucky you are to be able to do it at all. I usually remember that I'm lucky, like, oh my gosh, I get to do this for a living. Like that stuff, I feel like I try not to forget.
Sure.
And succeed. But after a while, you like, okay, that's what I do for a living. Let's go to work. And the fact that it's not a given that you can even go to work and do it was all new. And so that, you know, we didn't get to crank out a long tour like you did. We've done shows here and there. And I agree with you. Like they held more weight when we were performing, and it just meant more that we were able to do what we do. So yeah, what an amazing accomplishment, honestly, and what a cool thing for you and your band and crew to like experience together.
Absolutely. I have a question for you, because you have been doing this for so long, and I'm an independent artist. So you guys were kind of one of the people who set the trend of just doing it on your own, selling your own merch and putting your tour together. And I think that a lot of people have probably grown accustomed to that. But did you feel like with the removal of touring that you had a bit of an identity crisis? Or because you're saying like, this is what we do, but I think that that's also who I associate as my identity as a performer. So when that was taken away, it was kind of dark in the beginning. Did you feel that, or because you're so involved with your efforts with Reverb, did that help you kind of redirect your energy?
It was all of that. It was all of the above. Like I redirected my energy. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to hunker down. I've got 2 kids and a wife, and we live here in Maine. So I was like, great, I'll hunker down at home. This is kind of, in a weird way, kind of a plus of having to stay at home. It was just be with my family and spend time with them. And then, you know, we had a huge identity crisis at Reverb, because like everything we do is out on the road. And so all of a sudden stopped. So there was a lot of energy being put into things like this, you know, live stream series, because we had to come up with other ways of doing what we do and talking about and encouraging people to be more sustainable. So yeah, that's honestly like Reverb Kitchen was born out of the shutdown.
I think there were a lot of silver linings for me as far as just outreach to other artists and people in the creative community. Like even you and I getting a chance to meet through this, it's definitely catalyzed by the fact that we miss each other, and we miss that. Like the reason I live in Nashville is to be in close proximity to all these other creatives. And then for so long, we weren't even able to go down the street and see them play at our local venue. But I do think it's forced, and I'm speaking for myself, but a lot of artists that I'm friends with, it forced them out of their comfort zone to use methods like this to show more of their personality beyond just music. And I think that there's a big benefit in that. It's just kind of being comfortable with who you are and getting through the struggle together. And I started a podcast called Salute the Songbird, where I just talk to all these specifically women, even though I collaborate with all kinds. I'm kind of an expert at being a woman in the music industry. So I have all these amazing guests who are artists or executives, and I just feel like there was no shame in the game. I just hit them up however I could reach them and ask them to be on. And it's made me feel so connected to my community in spite of all the physical restrictions that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. It's been really nice to connect. Like, that's what's been really nice about this series that we've been doing, is that I know that I can connect on many levels with you without having met you before, because we share so much in common in our lives, and especially right now where we have to navigate this weirdness while
Yeah.
doing what we do. So yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about all this and more, but we should probably get to the recipe a little bit.
Yeah, right. Yes. I like it. Well, I'm making, it's chili season. You know, it's very cold. We're actually getting out of like a mini ice age that we had in Nashville that was kind of unusual. But I'm always in the mood for chili, even when it's warm. And I like it really spicy. And I think that, like, with Impossible, I'm using both a pound of sausage because it's super savory. And that's what we like about chili, is that umami. And then a pound of the Impossible ground beef. And I add a little Worcestershire to that to up the umami, and salt and pepper. And I'm going to brown that in that pan. But the big secret, I mean, I don't miss the meat at all, because if you have good spice, then that's everything. I take whole chilies and de-seed them and grind them up in a spice grinder, and get 2 tablespoons of that, 1 tablespoon per ground protein that you're using. And then all these.
Sorry, I just want to stop you for a sec. If for those who don't have a spice grinder at home like me, what would I do instead? Could I put in a Cuisinart or something?
Totally. Yes. Just make sure to cover your nose and eyes. Make sure that you don't let any, because, I toast them first. So you toast your chilies, and we have some really cool Latin American supermarkets in my neighborhood, and these are chilies de arbol, and they're super spicy. But yeah, use a Cuisinart, use a blender. I mean, and it will last. And this is what, like, that whole chili spice mix for what we're using tonight is. So that's the ground chili. This is the chilies de arboles, which is really the kick. Mexican oregano, which if you don't have that, you can just use regular oregano, but that's got like this kind of lemony aroma to it. And then cumin, which is really just warm and awesome. And then that's some just pink Himalayan salt. Lots of jalapenos. Sorry.
Nice. I was just say, for those who are following along, I'm looking at the public chat here too. The recipe is online at reverb.org. You can check it out there. It's probably also right in this Facebook post. If you want to follow along, or you want to refer to it later, which I definitely will. I got to say, the second I heard what you were cooking, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. You know, there's been amazing recipes, some that surprised me. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to cook that, and I'll try it, and it's awesome.
Right.
This one, I'm not going to be surprised. I know I'm going to love it, and I'm going to try it right away. So I'm really excited.
Well, this is such awesome stuff because it reacts to heat, kind of like meat would, if that's like a texture that you had grown accustomed to, because it has that like Maillard effect where it still gets that like cool brown crust on the outside, but without all the implications of what animal proteins have on the environment. And then these are, you don't have to do this many, but I diced 4 jalapenos de-seeded here, 2 red bell peppers, 4 cloves of garlic. Again, you can show more restraint if you want to, but I'm part Italian and that just happens. And then this is 1 entire red onion. You can use yellow or white onion. I just think it's pretty and it's a little bit stronger in its onion flavor. I let those brown for a while. So I'm going to brown the meat and the onions in separate pans. And the reason I'm doing separate pans is not because you can't do it all in one like heavy base pot, but I didn't want to overcrowd the vegetables since I am using bell peppers and everything. So putting the onions in and adding just a little bit of salt and ground peppercorns, just black peppercorns. I might need my sous chef to come over and help so they can see what we're cooking. Austin, my husband, is a really great appreciator of my food, but sometimes he'll help me with the sous chefing duties. And he and I work together.
Every house needs an appreciator and a sous chef.
Yes, come say hi. He can't hear us because I have my AirPods in, but this is Austin Marshall.
Hey, Austin, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Great.
I'm excited to eat some food.
Are you?
Yeah.
Good.
Bet you it's already starting to smell good in there.
It is. And also, let me just go through the rest of the ingredients. Will you actually open these two, the sausage and the Impossible ground beef? So these are rinsed and drained pinto beans. A lot of people use kidney beans. I kind of like using these smaller ones because they sort of thicken the chili naturally. They first open. And La Preferita makes really good canned pinto beans. I am not at that level where I'm soaking the beans yet. And still trying to enjoy the time I have when I am home. That takes up a little bit. But we're going to then brown our Impossible meat in a different pan and set it aside. And when I add the beans and everything, I will add our Impossible meat as well.
Yeah, all these great fresh veggies in there. I'm just going to take this moment to give Oxfam a shout out because they have a really great food resource for everybody. It's the Eat for Good guide. So it's oxfamamerica.org/eat for good. And that is a great resource for just how to cook more sustainably and healthily at home. But just seeing how the Stress Festivals reminded me to give them a shout out because obviously one of the big things you can do is get produce from your local farmers and farmers markets when you can, or from a grocer that carries local farm food.
Do you have like a co-op that you work with to get your veggies?
Yeah, we're I live in Maine, so we actually live across from a farm that has a number of veggies that we have. My favorite thing from there is actually they make their own garlic powder. And they grind and garlic scape powder, and it's the strongest, most powerful, most delicious stuff, and it's really incredible. So I love that. And our neighbors have chickens, so the eggs come from a few feet away.
That's so awesome.
So we're lucky.
My neighbors have chickens, and they just moved in. I'm trying to befriend them so I can reap the benefits of their eggs. One thing I was going to say about Impossible, because it is essentially already cooked, I'm breaking it up to have that chili texture, but it's food safe. So I feel like you also don't have this stress of food cross contamination and everything like that when you're using Impossible meat, which is, you should be washing your hands in between anyway, but there is just kind of a nice clean feeling about cooking with it.
So my wife is the one that kind of brought vegetarianism into our home, and God, it's so amazing. Just exactly what you're talking about, like not having to worry about, I've got chicken juice on my fingers or on my counter, or the garbage. The garbage doesn't. Well, first of all, we don't have much garbage, so we end up composting almost everything, and it just doesn't smell the same way it does when you whatever gristle.
Absolutely.
Nice little benefit. Sausage is a nice move. I didn't anticipate that. That is exciting.
Do you know why the sausage that Impossible makes is just naturally a little bit more savory? And come look at this. How you can see how it's browning. Look at that. Yeah. That is what people look for in ground beef. How it has that kind of awesome crust naturally, but because chili is so kind of umami, that sausage added in there with the beef, salt and pepper, Worcestershire, makes for just a really good flavor.
So the onions are still kind of doing their thing in the pan next door?
Yes, and they're looking pretty good. I'm probably going to add the jalapenos and the bell peppers next. I want to make sure everyone has all the ingredients just to rattle them off really quick. 1 onion, 2 bell peppers, 4 jalapenos, 4 cloves of garlic, whole canned tomatoes that I kind of pulled apart with my fingers, Worcestershire sauce. This is some homemade hot sauce. This is masa harina that I use to thicken the chili a little bit. You can use regular flour. Some people will deglaze it with a beer, which has a similar effect, but I decided to leave the beer out tonight. You can drink some beer with this, though. That would be delicious.
That's true.
And then I have some cilantro to top it off. This mix per pound is 1 tablespoon chili. I went a little crazy and did a whole teaspoon of these chilies arboles, 1 tablespoon oregano, Mexican oregano, half a tablespoon cumin, and some salt to taste. And I'll put that on the vegetables, so the onions, the peppers, and the jalapenos and the garlic with some tomato paste. So peppers are going in.
Yeah. What kind of heat is that right in there? Is that a medium high?
I am on right at medium because this pot gets super heavy or super hot because it's so heavy. But like I got some brown bits on the bottom here, so I might even turn it down still. All these
That's
colors.
sounding good.
Yeah, it smells really good. I wish we had smell-o-vision.
I should have eaten.
We got to work on it.
I know. I should have eaten something before doing this too. I'm like salivating.
Looks like Christmas in here.
Yeah, it's great.
And those onions are about translucent. That's when I add the other veggies, when these onions are starting to look kind of like browned and like you can see through them.
Nice. So is it all right if I pepper you with some non-cooking questions as you're cooking?
Yeah.
I would love to know more about your podcast. What was this, is this a similar origin story where it was part of the pivot when you were stuck at home because you couldn't go out on the road and play music, or what was the impetus for it?
Yes, to that. It was also, so I went on RJB's podcast called Past, Present, Future Live. And I don't know if you've ever met those guys at Osiris, but there's so many cool programs. And that podcast went so well that RJ, who started Osiris with Tom Marshall, reached out to me about having a female host because they were realizing that they kind of didn't have as many as they wanted and they wanted more representation there. And for me, it was the perfect timing because I was feeling so isolated with the pandemic. I missed seeing artists on a daily basis. And there were a lot of people that I felt deserved more props who I wanted to be a conduit for to help them tell their stories. And there's a lot of people selfishly that I was like, they're badass and I really want to talk to them. And I think that there's an appeal to two artists talking to each other because I'm not a journalist. I try and take it seriously and do my research before. And the research process is so fun because you're just listening to great music. And sometimes my guests have written these amazing memoirs. And it's just a really fun way to be in the conversation, but not the focus of the conversation. And you realize how even people like, Nancy Wilson, who I've had on the podcast, and Kathy Valentine of the Go-Go's, like they're these rock legends, but they've all had their fair share of struggles and their issues with the industry or their own insecurities. And I just think that was the antidote to feeling so alone and hopeless. And, people who have been through some shit are still really ambitious and hopeful about what the future holds for them in music. And it was mostly for me, and it turned out to be something that I've kept up now. We're just starting season 3 in a couple weeks. So it was another silver lining situation from the pandemic of, okay, well, what can I control in this crazy environment? And I think reaching out and letting people know that you appreciate what they're doing and that you respect and see all the things that they're doing to keep the music alive and stay engaged with their fans. I had no shame just kind of slipping into people's DMs and being like, you're awesome. Let's do this podcast or do a stream together. And I, before we got started, I told you how I was with the Mavericks earlier today, and I'm getting to go out with them on a few dates, but it's like, I don't know that would have happened if we both weren't doing streams regularly through nugs.net and connecting there. So I just feel like it's opened a lot of doors that, because they were open and the context of what was going on, I just walked through them. And
totally. How does it feel?
Learned a lot.
I was gonna say, was it weird to like, it's a different muscle being a host on a podcast or even doing what I'm doing. Like, how was that for you? Was that a weird transition, or was it really natural? Or
it was just being thrown to the fire. I think you want to be respectful. These are people that oftentimes I haven't met before, or they're people who I have a really long, great history with. And you want to have a formula for each podcast for your listener. But I think ultimately just being prepared and really caring about who you're talking to. I've walked into so many interviews where, especially in my early days on like country radio tour, when I was doing that 100 years ago, where I could see that I had been pulled up on Wikipedia 5 seconds prior. Yeah. And the interview is just really messy and unfocused, and you're trying to not be too talking pointy about it, but you're there to promote a song, or you're hoping they have some idea of what you have going on. And I think having respect for them and knowing all the work that goes into it. So I appreciate you doing this, because it is a lot of work, and it's fun work, but it doesn't change the fact that, these are people who care deeply about what they're talking about. And you want to also know what they have going on.
Yeah.
I'm going to deglaze this pan really quick.
Okay. I was going to say, it's easy to do this, I think, for me, because I know that the people who are saying yes to this are
yes.
involved in music. We have that in common, but also care about the environment. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it.
Right.
So it's an easier. For me, it's kind of an easier thing, because there's all this common ground. There's a very specific thing that we're trying to do together. So I like that. But then I also want to, I want to learn more about you, and I want the people who are watching to learn more about you. So I will admit, of course, I did look at your Wikipedia page as well. And something that popped up that I thought was interesting, because I grew up in New Jersey, is that your first musical endeavor was a Bruce Springsteen cover band, which is amazing. Yeah. The B Street band, right?
Yes, that's right. I knew you were a Jersey boy, and that would probably be something. Do you like Bruce Springsteen? Do you like Bruce Springsteen?
I have no choice. Yeah, Bruce, of course.
Right.
He's the boss.
You are kind of like predestined to like the boss.
Absolutely.
And this was the B Street band. I'm putting some of this in the B Street band, who is the hardest working band I've ever met. They've been together for almost 40 years. And even the lead singer looks like Bruce, but I was this like 16-year-old. All I had ever done thus far was sing in church, and I was writing some of my own songs, and just was like really scared and hadn't quite embraced the onstage persona that like I now really love and use as an outlet. But they were patient with me, and they taught me so much about just what music meant to people who were coming to escape from what they had going on in their life. And it's not about how great or perfect I can sing. It's about that transcendence. And they just took me under their wing and helped me so much with that early part of my career. And were probably very responsible in me making the decision to move to Nashville. And I was lucky to get like a record deal very early on, and I've been here for 14 years and things have changed a lot. And, what I want to do with my career has evolved a lot in my music, but I think I'm still in touch with those guys, and they are very supportive of the whole path that I've taken. And my dad was born in Jersey City too, so I have some Jersey ties.
There you go.
And it's pretty fun. This goes in now.
Okay, the Spice Medley.
All of it. And I like to put this in before I put in any liquid because I just want it to get into those veggies and really do its thing.
All right, that's good info.
But this is where you might want to back your head off the the fumes just a little because it might make you cry.
So when you're doing the podcast, let's go back for a second, back to that. Do you listen to podcasts? Like, do you have any, I don't know if you heroes, but like, did you have reference points of like, okay, I want it to be a little bit more like this podcast, or I really love listening to that? Or was it like, I don't know anything about podcasting. I know what I want to do with this podcast. So I'm going to talk about this.
I love podcasts. I love Audible. I listen to the New York Times argument all the time. Chris Shiflett, Walk the Floor. I was on Michael Franti's podcast. I listened to your episode with him, and like that's just positivity. So I love the long form conversation. I think that's why it doesn't get boring. But I really wanted there to be a big focus on music, and Osiris, who I am partnered with for this podcast, was really helpful to me in structuring out the body of each show. Like there's an intro that features a lot of the instrumental bed from my most recent album, but if we're talking about a song with the guests, like we'll make sure to play some of it and like have lots of references to their influences. We'll play a little bit of that so that there's like this cool cadence of a really relaxed conversation, but it has that nice produced quality that Osiris brings to the table. I just kind of am like, here's our conversation, but they make it sound just really easy to digest, and you feel like who everyone's talking about. It's not just a lot of music industry insider speak.
Right.
I wanted it to be inspiring and accessible to anybody, even if they weren't interested in pursuing a career in music, or even if they didn't know who the artist was. I want them to just enjoy the experience and feel like they're sitting in a living room with us.
Yeah. Was there, so you mentioned like going after a couple badasses. Was there anyone in particular that you were successful with that you were very nervous to approach?
Yes. I mentioned Nancy Wilson earlier. Mm-hmm. She couldn't have been nicer. I was on tour with Hart and Joan Jett in 2019. And I just thought she is such a great musician. She's written all these iconic guitar parts. She's kind of was one of the first guitar heroes in especially when it was at that point really male dominated. But she's just a cool chick. And I had sent her my whole album before. I sent all the guests the music and like kind of what I have going on, just so they can feel like, they don't have to feel like they're walking in blind. And she had listened to every single song and gave me comments on every song, told me which ones were her favorites. And she was just so humble and almost made it feel like an interview back and forth. And that's not something I was ever expecting, but it made me relax because it was one of the first big names that I got for season 1 that I just was kind of like, what the hell am I doing going into this? I'm running around the park listening to Barracuda. I'm like, I'm about to interview the woman who wrote this guitar riff. And she was disarming because she's a pro. And I love the variety. Like I've had Martina McBride on, I've interviewed Jen Hartswick, and we got to talk about the Beacon jams that she did with Trey over the pandemic. And through that, she's also like, these people have become buddies. And Natalie Hemby, who's an incredible songwriter in Nashville. We had a history together where we had written when I was in my early 20s and just moved here. And because of the podcast, I feel like it allowed us to reconnect, and we just wrote the other week. So just feels kind of special to have something that feels really well-intentioned turn into like meaningful friendships or rekindle friendships.
It's great. Yeah, that's awesome. How fun is that? I think that 2019 tour, Reverb Green, was it called? I think it's called Love Alive tour.
Yes, yeah, it was.
Yeah. I actually just looked it up. I'm pretty sure that was the same tour. Yeah, that was a Reverb sustainably managed tour.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, good. See, we planned all of that, everybody. That was just one of those things that just popped up in conversation organically.
Small world stuff. That was wild.
But Stevie Nicks, I want her to come on the show. And I do think that it bears mentioning that some of the guests on the show, probably in the future, will just be big advocates for women in music. And I don't really put the importance on gender at all, but it's more about just that kinship and the camaraderie. And I like to end all the podcasts with the question of, what is the benefit, as you see it, of being a woman in the industry? Because I think that we can get bogged down talking about all the things that are challenging, and there are challenges, but it's a nice note to end on, and everyone has a different answer.
That's cool.
Pretty much, which is wild because, there's a lot of people that I'm asking that, and it seems to just vary every time in a really wonderfully surprising way.
How would you answer your own question?
I think that just the podcast is living proof of that kinship, and I'm borrowing from a lot of these women, but just that feeling of being underestimated, I think if you use it, then it can be really powerful. Just don't take offense to it or dwell on it. Just go outperform all those expectations that were undeservedly set for you.
Love it. Is that it looks like we're close. Is this?
Yeah.
I don't want to, this happens a lot. I'll often distract.
No, it's totally fine.
Yeah,
so actually, this is some serious flavor here. We've got some concentrated spiced vegetables with those crushed whole tomatoes. I'm putting this in now. The other thing, I don't need to drain this out because it's not full of a bunch of gross animal fat. It can just go right in. And I've already seasoned it. So I use 1 pound of each. Can you see this?
Yeah, it's perfect.
And I said I wasn't going to add a beer, but I think I lied because that'll just help all of this work together.
Never hurts.
No, yeah, a beer, and it'll cook off. I'm going to grab one.
All right. I'll take this moment to plug Impossible because
Please do.
They are the sponsor of this season. So we want to, first of all, just say thank you to them for supporting us, but also thank you to them for doing what they do. Like giving people who love the texture and flavor of meat an alternative that is way more eco-friendly and better for our planet. The stat that I have written down that I'm reading right now is the world's food supply chain accounts for 26% of global greenhouse gas pollution. About half of those result from livestock production. So if we can all use Impossible and avoid eating livestock, it will have significant impacts for climate change. What's your beer of choice there? That's a colorful label.
Oh my gosh. I'm so glad Austin came by because I was about to put this in here and it's a melon beer. So don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't think you want that.
All right, someone else can drink that. I'm just gonna go with it straight up Yingling lager here. I put some corn. It's called masa harina. It's like really great corn flour. Helps thicken it up. I'm gonna stir that. Add this beer. Add those drained and rinsed beans, and we are in business. I let that simmer for a little bit because chili just tastes better when it's been simmering for a bit. But you'll get to see it. I could eat this right now after the alcohol cooks off.
That's
unless
amazing.
you want to drink your beer and eat your chili at the exact same time. Let it cook off a little bit.
Sure, it's been done, but
Oh yeah. This looks so good. It smells so good. And
it looks amazing.
I'll make sure to send over a recipe with all the ingredients and everything listed out with the amounts.
Great. Yeah, and we'll put that along with the video. For those who are watching and came in maybe a little late or want to share this, this will live at reverb.org. And you can just go down on our website and click to our series of Reverb Kitchen episodes where we will have this video and the recipe. So that was the beans that you just threw in there, right?
That was the pinto beans. And I'm like getting a little coffee because the spice is real. But making your own spice, I'll show you. I made extra today because I'll inevitably want to make this chili again.
Nice.
So if you make your own, it does kind of just up the ante to awesomeness.
Sure.
But this is what it looks like. And it's like the most hearty chili ever.
It's gorgeous. It's amazing.
And if you let it cook down, then it's not going to have that soupiness. It's going to do what chili do.
Yeah.
Like a cowboy chili.
All right. Well, while you're letting that cook down a little bit, I'm curious, and I think others that are watching would like to know more about this too. I've always been fascinated with the Grand Ole Opry. You're a regular there. You play there a lot. You I think just played there a couple of days ago.
I did. I just had my 75th.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's wild.
I can only imagine what that's like, but I would love to have a little bit more of the inside scoop of like what's it like to play there? What's the scene there? Is there a through line of those 75 times you've played there? What's the common ground? Just what's it like to do that? I'll never have the opportunity because this is not in the cards for me, but what is that like?
It's one of the longest running institutions in music. And I think that in itself just speaks volumes about what the significance of playing the Grand Ole Opry means. There's a heightened awareness that I have every time I go on stage of all the people that have gone before me. And I try to just let that pump me up and not psych me out, but sometimes it can go either way. But I wouldn't categorize, and I don't think anyone would categorize my music as country. Like, you're not going to hear me on country radio. But what I love about the Opry is that they've embraced me and what I have to offer as like a rootsy Americana artist, and they've been able to evolve with what's going on in Nashville. And I think that's why they've been around and will continue to be around for a long time. And they had Amethyst Kia on there. If you guys don't know her music, it's incredible. Allison Russell, who's got this Grammy nominated record, Outside Child. And I think that they're actively just trying to stay with the times. And that's why I've continued to be invited to play there. Like Elizabeth Cook plays there a lot. But then, of course, they'll invite people who are on country radio, and they'll invite the Oak Ridge Boys who've been making records for decades. And it's just this one place that you can see everybody kind of come together to put on a radio show. And when I walk through the door, from the security guards to the guy who books the show, everyone just welcomes you like a family. So that's pretty special, especially as someone who's kind of felt in Nashville just like a little bit out of the box in every category. You know, you're like, where do I belong? Well, I feel like I belong there. And then musically, everything else just falls into place.
And what's the scene as far as like, is there a lot of interaction between musicians? Is it an opportunity for people to meet each other?
Yes.
Like, what's the vibe backstage and stuff?
So I took some friends of mine who were visiting last weekend backstage. It was their first time seeing the whole backstage environment, which is always really exciting for me because the first room on the left when you arrive is designated for the artist if there is an artist there, who's making their Opry debut. So I always peek in there. I see what expression is on their face and how intense they are. And then there is a room designated for a more comedic act for famous couples throughout history. There's this awesome picture of like Dolly and Paul McCartney meeting in that room. The spice is getting me again. And seriously, there's a mini Pearl room. There's a Women of Country room, a Porter Wagner room.
Drink some of that watermelon beer. You can do it. Or Topo Chico.
And I know I've been on dry January, so it's Topo Chico all the way. But there's like everyone leaves their doors open, and you can just hear like the bluegrass band is practicing, and it's pretty cool.
No dying. Okay. No dying on this. We're live streaming.
That's how you can tell that the flavors are developing.
When you can no longer talk.
And they wanted to know my friends' names who were in from out of town. Just the people who work there weren't ignoring like who I had brought. So it's a total family vibe, and I feel very lucky to be considered part of that. And I know that I'm not who you would typically assume to be like an opera artist, but I feel like if I can play the Grand Ole Opry and Bonnaroo and it all works, then get in where you fit in, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, and I think, artists that are unique, that's one of it's the good and bad, right? Like if you don't fit neatly into a box, it's probably because you're doing something different. That's a good thing.
Sure. And I think the only people who are really afraid of that are people who understandably have the burden of trying to market you from the label side. And I definitely don't think listeners are like, I'm going to listen to jam music only, or I'm going to listen to this genre. So I don't fear that. Like, I'll just stay living in the reality of like who's coming to the shows and how the audience is working together with each other. And I will try and make it as easy on the marketing department as I can, but you also have to do what feels right.
That's their job.
And if you're gonna do this for a long time, as you know, you evolve, because I think that's what's expected of us as humans and artists. Hopefully you're not doing the same thing for decades on decades.
I couldn't do it. I don't know how anyone else could, but I wouldn't.
No,
it just would.
But we love that about you, and we appreciate that about you. So keeps it exciting.
Cheers to that. We have to cheers. Yes. We have to see you take a bite of your delicious chili now that you're hopefully no longer dying in your throat from the spices. Although I imagine when you actually swallow it, it might be quite spicy.
Let's see.
But we need to have the vicarious bite. That's how we, there isn't a whole lot of structure to this thing we do, but there's
avocado and lime I like to put on top there. I got some cilantro. You guys know chili is all about the toppings too. I use some Greek yogurt instead of sour cream. It's good if you're into that.
I've never tried Greek. I've only done sour cream.
It's really good and creamy, and I guess a little more virtuous, but I just think it tastes good. Okay, here we're doing it.
Doing the vicarious bite. How'd you do?
It's good. It's so good. I mean, I think this is better than it's meat cousins, which is a gross term. For sure. Meat cousin. I don't want to be a meat cousin.
No.
It's so good.
That is so great. I cannot wait to dig into this recipe and make some tomorrow. I'm going to do it.
I actually have some of my bandmates coming over tonight to help me eat all of this. So
that's awesome. That's great.
Make it for some people that you love, or just make it for yourself and eat it all week long, because chili tastes better as the days go by.
That's
And
right.
it freezes well too if you just take the time to thaw it and not put it in the microwave or something.
Awesome. Thanks so much for doing this, Maggie. That's awesome. Really appreciate it. I am so glad that we got this time to spend with each other and get to know each other. I hope this isn't the end of our time talking. I hope we get to connect again. But thank you so much for doing the show.
It won't be, and I'm so happy I got to meet you. I love what you do, and just thanks for letting me be a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we'll see you. I can't wait to actually get on the road and get back into Nashville. I love going there. We always try to time it with a day off there so we can spend some time with our friends there. And
please let me know if you have any time to just quickly say hello. I'd love that.
Absolutely. I do want to also thank again Impossible Foods, Oxfam, Relics, Guster for promoting this as well, Defend Our Future, and others for partnering with this show and promoting this episode. Thanks, Maggie. Really appreciate it. Nice to meet you. And thank you, Austin, for help in the background there. Nice camera work and nice sous chefing and technical figuring out.
Couldn't have done it without him.
That's right. Thanks for the IT support.
That's right. Thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Stick around, but we're going to say goodbye to the audience now. Thanks, everyone who was watching. And stick around. There will be more episodes of Reverb's Kitchen. Just pay attention to the Instagrams, and we will let you know when we're doing it again. Thanks again, Maggie.